The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodensky. On my right, Christopher K. Shortell. We're both in front of the two swans, photographed by Jeff Cohan. See? I got the one and you got the other one there.
I'm glad it's not an eagle.
It's not an eagle. Yeah, we
Nightmares about that eagle.
The eagle landed, and we're done with that eagle. But it was a great
It was a
shot.
beautiful photo.
It
I
was
just
a
didn't want it
beautiful
above my
photo. It didn't
head.
work for the show, though. It didn't work for last week.
Yeah.
There's a topic that caught your eye, Chris, and we chatted about it briefly in preparing for the show, and that was the controversy going on in Hartford as to whether or not all children should be vaccinated against a basket of diseases, or whether or not the state of Connecticut should allow a religious exemption. Reframe the issue if you need to, but why did this catch your attention, and what's your view of the whole thing?
Sure. Well, the issue is that before the state legislature, there is a bill, and what it actually just passed yesterday committee, so it's advancing. And what it does is it grandfathers children who are in already have a religious exemption. They're grandfathered into. They can finish their education, but it would bar children
Without getting
vaccinated. But it would bar children going forward. It would pass. Presumably, Governor Lamont would sign it this summer if it gets that far, and it would go into effect this fall, and it would go into effect where you would not be able to go to school, public school, unless you were vaccinated. You could get a medical exemption. You could not get a religious exemption. And what prompted it is that the CDC, I believe, recommends that you have a 95% vaccination rate in your population, and the concern was that it was we're dipping below that percentage in Connecticut. There's a broader issue that these vaccinations have come under fire by some people claiming they cause autism. There's no scientific evidence. I could cite articles from the CDC, from the Mayo Clinic, but that has taken hold, and it's not a right or left thing. It's really both sides, kind of extreme elements. And so that's driven concern not just in Connecticut, but across the country. The way I would frame the issue is this. There's two questions. Number one, do vaccinations work? We just kind of covered that. They do work. The reason they work is that, yes, you could just naturally get one of these diseases and be immunized from it if you survive it, but there's side effects. You could get polio, but you might be paralyzed. So getting the vaccine prevents that. The second issue is the religious aspect. That's what caught my eye because I'm a practicing Catholic. And I, as a Catholic, in Connecticut, has a plurality of Catholics in it when you look at all the religious affiliations. I had never heard that Catholicism was in any way against vaccinations. I understand that the source of the vaccines have caused some issues in the past, but I did a little research just to make sure. And it turns out that Catholicism does not have any stance against vaccinations. And there have been different articles. The one I'll cite is from the National Catholic Reporter, June of 2019. The Vatican released a document, Dignitas Personae. Apologies to my sister, who's the Latin teacher at Lyman Hall. If I took Latin, I shouldn't butcher.
What's it mean?
The dignity of a person.
Okay.
But that was in the article.
Okay.
I would have gotten that. I did take 4 years of Latin at Xavier. But in this was a document on bioethics, and that the danger to the health of children could permit parents to use a vaccine. And then there's another director of communications for the New York State Catholic Conference was quoted as saying, "The herd immunity provided by the mandatory vaccination law is an essential component of maintaining the public health, and we support this policy." And then finally, I'm going to quote the National Catholic Bioethics Center in Philadelphia stated that Catholics are morally free to use the vaccine despite its historical association with abortion, because the vaccines were initially created from stem cells from aborted fetuses, and then the cell line still traces back to that. But the Catholics have a moral obligation to protect the life and health of their children and those around them. So that's the Catholic perspective. Now, Catholicism isn't the only religion. I understand that. So I will close with an article that appeared in Slate, and it appeared in February of 2015. So it's 5 years old. And this was kind of my reaction to this issue. The article is entitled, "Why is there a religious exemption for vaccinations? Almost no religions object to them." And the article went through, and I'm not going to read it, but the article basically goes through, and it ultimately cites two religions, but even they're two, even within those two denominations, it's not clear that there's a religious opposition, that some people within them, a rabbi, Orthodox Jew rabbi, made a confusing comment. So my take on it, I as a Catholic, I'm very sensitive to religious freedom issues, but at the same time, I don't see this as a religious freedom issue, and it scares me that that people are claiming this. Because the herd mentality is what is the herd mentality, but the herd immunization is what's needed. And again, you look at the stats, polio, there have been more cases of polio, I think, in 2019 than there were in the last 15 years, because this sort of mentality has taken hold. There's still not a lot, but it's scary that science had eradicated many of these diseases, and now they're making a comeback for what really is not, I don't think, a preventable reason. So that's my take. Sorry for talking for so long on the segment.
Yeah, a good job. I'm going to fill in some of the blanks and maybe cite some fun facts and come at it from a legal, a little bit more of a legal thing, because it sort of fits with my background.
Sure.
You think you may have found a religion that forbids vaccination. Well, I found one.
Okay.
Yeah. It is the Congregation of Universal Wisdom, a religion based on belief in chiropractic spinal adjustments, and universal intelligence forbids vaccinations. There you go.
Okay.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So I got this out of Wikipedia, and that's the first place I went to kind of get my feet on the ground, and then I did some other research.
Sure.
So don't blame me. This is Wikipedia that sort of sets the table.
Right.
Vaccination and religion have interrelations of varying kinds. No major religions prohibit vaccinations, and some consider it an obligation because of the potential to save lives. Many religions, however, provide that each individual has the right to decide whether or not to use vaccines according to his or her own moral conscience. Regardless, some parents either fake religious adherence or invent religions to provide exemption. I'm just picking, I already mentioned the universal intelligence, and the chiropractic spinal. Some conservative Christian groups in the United States oppose mandatory vaccination for diseases typically spread via sexual contact, arguing that the possibility of disease deters risky sexual contact. It goes on. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has made vaccination an official initiative in its own humanitarian relief program. The church has also called on its members to see that their own children are properly vaccinated. The majority of The majority of Orthodox rabbis view vaccination as a religious obligation, and there's a lot more, there's a lot more detail in Wikipedia. It's hard, I think, for the way you and I are hardwired, to understand the religious exemption, because I think, and this is sort of a question, when we think of religion, we generally think of a person's relationship to their God and all the set of practices and rituals that surround and contribute to that. So we try to figure out, well, what is going on in some religious beliefs that God or their view of God would be displeased
Right.
if it's, if there's a vaccination. Now, they believe it, but for us, it's hard to get. It's hard to understand. Let me stop there. I'm going to take a drink of water, and you comment on that while I find my
Sure.
other note. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can only speak for myself.
Well,
so
of
I look
course,
at
that's
science.
all we're doing.
I look at science. To me, science explains the how, not the why. Science is a gift from God.
Yeah.
So that's just how I look at it. I look at it when I look at astronomy, when I look at any branch of science. The when the Mayo Clinic, if I had cancer, I might go to the Mayo Clinic, and I don't think any Catholic would, if the Mayo Clinic said we want to help you cure your cancer, would not go to the Mayo Clinic. Well, the Mayo Clinic is saying vaccines are okay. The Vatican released a document. So I think that you hit it on the head when you talked about, that it's believed people are claiming this religious exemption as a way to get out of it. Now let's just two things I want to comment on. Some of the vaccination for the sexually transmitted diseases, that is not part of the Connecticut.
That's not an issue in this controversy.
Not yet. No, I think
Yeah.
now the argument would be that sure, it's not in this version, but once they pass this, nothing can prevent them 3 years from now to lump that one in. So
Yeah.
so that's just the full disclosure that would be a counter argument. But as of today, it is not in there. The second point I'll make is, so this gets back to a topic we haven't covered on the show. It's celebrities. And I'm sorry out there to anyone watching to say this. If you have a celebrity you admire, celebrities are idiots. And some of this anti-vaccination stuff came from celebrities. I think, oh God, I don't want to say, is it Jenny McCarthy who was on 90210? Bruce is giving me the thumbs up. Yeah, Bruce, thank you for that.
She's a research assistant
My
now?
research, that's right.
We're gonna have to
She
hold
wrote
this-
books about it. I used to listen to Imus in the morning back in the day, and Imus's wife, Deirdre Imus, who's done a lot of great things. They have a ranch for kids, but I mean, she's a big anti-vaxxer. So my point is, my whole thing with celebrities, if you're, I don't want to hear about their politics. I don't want to hear about the reviews. Shut up and act. Shut up and sing. But that influences some people. And then the last thing I'll say, to be fair, there are parents. I try to read up on the other side because I'm trying to be fair. I know there are parents who they claim that their infant, or their toddler was fine, and then he came home after the shot, and 2 days later he was acting weird, and he had autism. So I understand there's a human need to find a cause, and that had to be the cause. So I get it, but anyway, that's where I am on this.
So some anti-vaxxers phrase the issue in terms of constitutional rights, that they have a right not to be vaccinated. And there's derivatives of that argument, and Craig Fishbein, in fact, has raised one of those issues, which I'll address in a second. Craig Fishbein raises it in terms of parental rights with constitutional foundations. A little bit of history of this. There's a smallpox. Smallpox had plagued the human race like for all time. And back in the early part of the 20th century, vaccinations became possible. In fact, it started, I think, a couple hundred years before that. Back in colonial days, they first experimented with vaccinations against smallpox. But here was a case that tested the issue and involved the state of Massachusetts, and the case is called the Jacobson case, very famous. In Jacobson, which arises, from this 1905 situation, the state of Massachusetts delegated to local authorities the power to mandate, to require smallpox vaccines. And faced with a smallpox outbreak, the city of Cambridge passed an ordinance requiring all people not vaccinated within a certain time frame to be vaccinated or re-vaccinated. And there's a criminal penalty, $5,
Okay.
if you didn't get vaccinated. Minister Jacobson, who brought this case, and that's why it's called the Jacobson case, refused to be vaccinated, and he also didn't want to pay the fine. And he challenged his conviction all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld his conviction on the grounds that individual rights are not absolute, and states can interfere with rights to protect public health as long as it's reasonable. So there is no constitutional legal argument that you don't you don't have a right to refuse vaccinations if the rule is reasonably related to public health and safety. There is a Journal of Constitutional Law, just a couple sentences I want to get to. The premise of the article, very well researched, very thorough, say that no court so far, state or federal in the United States, has found state school immunization mandates unconstitutional. This is true even when there's no religious exemption. No state or federal court has backed up this claim, I have a right not to be vaccinated. There's no basis in the law for that. Someone could take an appeal, things may change. One is precedent. They say, one reason for this is precedent. For over a century, and I just refer to that Jacobson case, for over a century, our jurisprudence has solidly and consistently found school immunizations mandates to be constitutional with no requirements that state provide non-medical exemption. This mandate fits neatly into our basic principles, which allows reasonable public health regulation even when it interferes with individual rights. Now, the same article deals with a claim that Craig Fishbein made. Craig went in front of the legislature and testified against the bill. Craig sides with the anti-vax group, and his written testimony says, in part, when it comes to deciding whether to give children vaccinations or not, the opinion that matters the most is that of the child's parents. That's a partial excerpt of what he said, but it's the nub of it. And I think the legal thinking has been and probably always will be that the child has rights too, not just the parent. The child has rights. The child has their own rights to be healthy. And the public has rights not to be infected because of some child that's not vaccinated because of a claim of parental rights. And because a parent's right is not absolute, these other interests, the interest of protecting the child individually, and because the community needs protection too, that is thought to trump Craig's argument, and I don't think anyone can cite a case sort of backing that up. Let me take a breath and get your thoughts before we go
Great.
on. Anything, or
No, I have to
are
go
we done?
against Craig.
Are
No,
we
I have
done?
to go against Craig. Well, I think I would say two things.
Yeah.
The notion that you somewhere, not that Craig said this, but somewhere in there you talked about the concept of, well, the child should decide when they're older. The problem is that these diseases have the worst complications at the very, very youngest of ages. So you can't wait till you're 18 to decide to get the shot. So, and in terms of, we should have Craig on. I'm sure we will have Craig on.
He's coming on in March.
Well, we can talk about it then with Craig. So,
Change the subject.
sure.
Did you get your vaccination?
Oh yeah.
Did you get your flu shot?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the things that happened recently that has slipped under the radar is that the Town Pension Commission has released its fourth quarter report, and basically that's the year-end report. It's calendar year ending 2019, and I like to bring this up at least once a year because the pension is a real big deal in Wallingford. I mean, there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of tax dollars involved that affects a lot of town employees, and it's such a significant issue, even though it may appear a little dry, a little intimidating. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. On the Citizen Mike show, it's something we need to talk about, and again, one of the underlying themes of the show is how and why government works. Yeah, and so this fits into that. We find from the year-end pension report that the pension has a lot of money in it. Bruce, let's get that first slide up there. And what we're going to show you is a page. Actually, Bruce, take that down and put the other one up. Put the other one up first. We're going to show you a page right out of the pension report. Now, I know it's small, but I want to show you what a page really looks like. And I'm gonna, you don't have to get too close to the TV set. I'm going to tell you what it says. The red arrow, of course, is mine. But if you know where to look, it's not really mysterious. What this page says is we have $226 million in the town pension fund year ending December 31, 2019. We have $226 million, so indulge me if I want to talk about it, because it's a lot of dough.
Okay.
And the arrow points down to the performance of the Wallingford pension plan over 10 years. Lower right corner, you can see that. 10 years, we're getting annualized 8.7% on, on our investments. Bruce, take that down. Don't put the other one up just yet. And so, hey, 8.7% on, that's a lot. That's great. That's a great return. That sounds really terrific. The Wallingford Pension Commission has done a wonderful job. We thank them for their service. They're qualified people with a lot of experience. And so this is really good news. We have 8.7% return on this, on this bundle of money. But there's another page in the Wallingford pension report, and Bruce, let's put that one up. And we see what the rest of the world is getting. And it's small, I know, but this is, again, a page right out of the Wallingford quarterly report, year ending December 31. The S&P 500 is getting 13.6% over 10 years. So it's not just like one lucky year or 2 or 3 lucky years strung together. The S&P 500 I picked out because it's, first of all, the top of the list. Most people who watch TV news, they get the stock market report in about 30 seconds. They talk about the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500. The S&P 500 index is a basket of stocks that track the 500 largest companies on the New York Stock Exchange. So these are big, blue chippy, dividend paying, safe stocks to the extent that stocks are safe. But you can see that stocks aren't doing too bad over 10 years. They return 13.6. So, Bruce, let's take that down. The question then is, wait a minute. Why is the S&P 500, and Chris, I'm not expecting you to answer this unless you want to jump in, but why is the S&P getting 13.6% and the Wallingford pension plan getting 8.7%? The difference when applied to the millions of dollars we have is a lot of money. It's millions of dollars in one year. How could it be the S&P is getting that return and we're getting something much lower? And the answer is because we have a lot of bonds. Roughly a third of our portfolio is in bonds. Bonds give crap returns. They always have, they do now, and they always will. They'll always give crap returns. So it's going to water down your total return if you mix your S&P 500 with bonds. It brings a return of 13% plus down to 8 plus because you have bonds. Now, why would we hold bonds? That's the question. What's the rationale for Wallingford holding about $75 million in bonds that return basically crap? The government bond, I think on the news today, 10-year government bond, the safest you can get, is yielding like 1.4%. Do you want your investment in something that yields 1.4% over 10 years? I mean, that's crazy. That doesn't even meet inflation. I mean, you just don't want that. But why do people put their money in bonds? Well, it's not for the returns. It's because they want a cash equivalent. Maybe at some point they know they're going to have to draw down on cash, either to supplement their retirement income, or maybe they bought a factory and they got to come up with $500 million and they got to park $500 million someplace for a couple of months. So buying bonds, you don't buy it for the return or the yield. You buy it for preservation of income so that when you need cash, it's there and you don't have to sell stocks at a loss. In the last 3 or 4 days, stock market, went down 2,000 points. If you're in a position there where you had to sell stocks to raise the cash you needed, you wouldn't be too happy about it. So it's good to have bonds on hand. Am I getting too...
I'm following you.
Are you sure?
I was an English major, but I'm following you.
Okay, so you need some bonds to cover cash requirements. So now the next question is...
What are Wallingford's cash requirements? Is that the next question?
You hit it.
Okay. I'm asking. I don't know.
You hit it. But no one has asked that question.
Okay.
No one has asked, how much do we need in bonds? How much do we need in cash or cash equivalents? What study is out there? What data is out there that will tell us in an objective way how much cash we need to have on hand? Mm-hmm. Instead, Wallingford follows a rule of thumb. It's ideology. It's not thoughtful. It's not data-driven. It's not research-driven. That they say 1/3, 75 million in bonds that return crap. That's the dogmatic approach. Rather than, if the market takes a tumble and stays depressed for, let's say, 4 years, how much cash do we need on hand to be able to withstand a 4-year correction? Now, a consultant with algorithms could run many different scenarios. Well, how far does the market go down? Well, they could give us a menu of 4-year corrections, and they could say, well, under all of these scenarios, the most you'll ever need in cash is 10 million. And by the way, that's my back of the napkin, back of the envelope estimate, because I looked at the cash flow. It's in the audit. I mean, you can find this stuff out. It's there if anyone wants to look.
And that's to pay out your obligations.
Exactly.
Of people who are getting the money,
Yeah.
that qualify, they're getting the money.
Exactly. And remember, we're getting money in because employer contributions are, in the 8-9 million range. Employee contributions are coming in. So it's not like we have no income. And we have a basket of stocks that give dividends. So we have that income coming in. And so keeping in mind the income that's coming in from those sources, what do we need on hand? What do we need on hand to pay under the worst case scenario, what we're required to pay over 4 years of a depressed market? So to illustrate the point, I'm going to use 10 million, but that should be researched. So the amount we'd have in bonds would go down from 75 million to 10 million, yeah? Okay. And we could put 65 million to work at 13% plus, rather than the crap returns that bonds get of 3 or 4%, because that's about the return that bonds get. We just talked about the government bond is like 1.4 for 10 years. So the idea is that you don't hold more in bonds than you need to. You put what you don't need to hold in bonds in higher performing stocks like those in the S&P 500. And you make a lot of money. And the money that you make, you don't have to, it doesn't find its way into the tax bill. You don't have to contribute as much to the, over the long run, to the pension plan and so on and so forth. But no one has done the analysis. Pension Commission hasn't, Comptroller hasn't, the mayor hasn't ordered it. No one has done the analysis. How much money do we really need to put into cash equivalents, or bonds for a long-term, a long-term look? It may be. Let me restart that sentence. The current policy now is 1/3 in bonds, 2/3 in stocks, but there's been no justification for that. There have been two statements made and not justifications. One is, well, we have 1/3 in bonds because you know what would have happened if during that great recession, the market crash of 2008, do you know what would have happened if we were 90% in stocks? Do you know? And they don't finish the analysis. The rebuttal should be, I don't know, you tell me. What would have happened if we had been in 2017 90% in stocks, we rode the market down and then rode it up? Where would we be? Do you know the answer to that? And they don't. And they find that question impertinent to even ask that. And the other excuse I've heard for having as much of 1/3 in crap bonds is when the stock market tanked in 2008, 9, and 10, our pension contributions would have spiked. Would you have wanted that? It would have spiked. I don't know what spike means. Did you really measure what the spike is? No. Where would the pension contributions be today if we had been 90% in bonds, rode the Great Recession of 2008 all the way down to the bottom, and brought it all the way back up to the Trump stock market of today?
Wow.
February 25.
The Trump stock market.
The Trump stock market of 2020. I will borrow that because it fits my rhetorical,
It's just a little...
my use here.
Yeah.
So that analysis has never been done. So why hasn't it been done? You interested in that analysis?
Yeah, let me just go back. So I was just going to ask you, I think you just answered it. So the 10 million in bonds, that would be 10%. We go to a 90-10 split Is that, or no?
That's a good question.
What's the
What,
split?
what I'm suggesting is, let's run the algorithms, run the numbers on a 90-10 split.
Okay.
Let's run it on a 95-5 split. Let's run it on a 75%, 25% split.
Yeah.
Let's be thoughtful about our stock and bond mix so it matches what our cash needs are, rather than pulling a rule of thumb out of there, well, everyone does 60-40 or something like that.
Right.
So I'm not prescribing it. It should be the consultant should do the numbers and say, here is your optimum balance between stock and bonds. And I don't know what that's going to be.
Right.
Very well, maybe 90-10 or 95 stocks, 5% bonds. Very well could be that.
Yeah, I think you hit on the head. And anyone that's met with a financial advisor will be able to quote, will know this stat. And it's basically, if you had your money in the stock market for the Great Depression, you made your money back in 7 or 8 years, I think is the stat. So every financial advisor tells. I think the thing is, though, people are different from municipalities. And I think that works mostly in your favor in this argument. But I think that, a person, as they get closer to retirement, is going to want to shift into more conservative investments so they don't lose all their money. Because if I'm 60 years old, I can't wait 10 years for my money to recover my money.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
So, but that's
I
a person.
agree with you
But that's-
1,000%.
Yeah. So as people watching at home, that's a person. That's your 401k. That's individual. But town never gets old.
Town never gets
Town
old.
is not a person. So
And the income keeps coming in the way of
Right.
employer contributions and employee contributions.
Right.
It keeps rolling in.
Right. The income comes rolling in. Now, people will argue, well, what if there's a catastrophe? Well, if there's a catastrophe and the town of Wallingford can't tax people, there's bigger issues than the pension.
That's right.
So let's just set that aside.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to, though, then diverge a little bit, I think another difference between a person and a municipality is, you kind of talked about this in your I'm not going to call it your rant, but in your dialogue about this, that there is a stability question where in a municipality where people are elected to 2-year terms, yes, the 10 years is 13%, but I have here the S&P 500 total returns going back, 80 years. So last year, you cited 2008, which was the big one. Last year was negative 3.27%. Then I'm sorry, not true. Last year was huge. Last year we gained 31.49.
Right.
2 years ago, it was about negative 4.38%. When I look at this list, there's wild fluctuations. Even in the Trump stock market, 2017, we're up 21.83%. 2015, we only gained 1.38% that year. The point being that it's a lot to ask. I do see some credibility to the argument that a town looking at it, and this is our pension dollars, and they're
We're a
going up.
very long-term investor.
For very-
We are the town is a very long-term
It has to,
investor.
right, but is
Yeah.
the voter a long-term is looking at it that way? And could someone? I don't know. I'm just saying that's.
I think you're raising a good point, and I can help.
Okay.
And I can help.
Yeah.
If the stock market drops precipitously, a deep dive in 1 year, does that mean that the pension contribution kind of has to spike up in 1 year? You include the increased pension contributions in the tax bill, and the taxpayers sort of have a little bit of a jolt. I think you didn't say it quite that way.
I didn't, but that's-
But it's close, I think,
Yes.
to what you're getting at. The actuaries that we use, and this used to be the case, I'm sure it still is, have already taken that into account. And they used to have, and I'm sure they still do, a smoothing process over 5 years. So like averages out these spikes and dips and over a period of time, so that the taxpayer doesn't get a jolt, and that we can take advantage of the long term and not be victim to what's happening this year and last year. And so the smoothing out process needs to be explained, and it's never been explained.
Okay. Much like the PUC smooths out the power hedging.
I'm not going to. Yes, you're right
Let
on
me-
top of that.
okay,
So
that's a fair
but
question.
Good point. But
Yeah.
that's a good point.
So let me one of the themes of the Citizen Mike show is always be skeptical of the official version.
Let me.
Or did I use the wrong
Don't
word?
give. Yeah, you did. Don't give undue deference.
Don't give undue deference.
to the official version.
Right. Don't
Yeah.
be skeptical. I mean, sorry, be skeptical. All right, don't give undue deference to the officials. So that's the Citizen Mike show.
Yeah.
So the Citizen Shortell, one of my tenets
Yeah.
is, what do other towns do? And I asked.
And I can tell you.
I'm gonna throw one example out, for
Yeah.
better or for worse.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you an example that kind of fits your point. I don't know if it goes all the way, but I looked at the second largest pension fund in the country, which is the California State Teachers Retirement Plan. I looked at that only because there's another plan we deal with at work. It's a health plan, CalPERS, and so I kind of knew about this one. And the California State Teachers Retirement Plan in 1997 had a 70-30 split, and they have a board. I mean, it's huge. It's way bigger than Wallingford, but they have a board that oversees it, has to do reporting just like Wallingford does. And in 2015, they basically shifted to an 81-19 split. So they've gone in your direction. I don't know if they've done the same analysis you're talking about, but they have clearly gone away from that 70, that 1/3 must be in bonds. So I think that kind of bolsters your point. I know you're saying you want to do the analysis and see what the numbers are.
Yeah, I want to run the
So
numbers.
you're not wedded to 90-10 or 80. You want to see. I think the last thing I'll say is, not being a financial advisor myself, I do feel like every financial advisor I know is ultra conservative when it comes to this type of thing. So that might be a barrier, almost an industry cultural barrier. I don't know.
I think you're right. I think the standard of care among pension advisors is that there's safety in numbers. Before you give advice to a town, I mean, I don't want to confuse individual investors because that's a totally different animal.
Right.
But if the prevailing wisdom is that there be a let's say 80-20 split, you can't be sued for malpractice if you recommend an 80-20 split.
Right.
That may be terrible advice. It may not be based on any research or any reason. It may not be data driven at all.
Right.
But as long as it's the prevailing wisdom, you're safe as a financial advisor. You can't be fired from your job. Your retainer is not going to be canceled because you advised the town of Wallingford to do what every other town is doing. It's in my view not a good result.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good rationale, but it is the safety in numbers approach, and they all play poker together. So they all play poker, and they say, "What are you advising Middletown to do?" I got them in a 2/3, 1/3 split. Oh, me too. Thank goodness.
They all play poker.
They all
together.
play poker
They all
together.
play. This is inside the mind of Citizen Mike. They all.
You don't think
play
they do?
Poker
You don't think
together.
they know what's going on?
Everyone's playing poker.
You don't think they don't know what what's going on?
I think there are things. There are industry. I think there's industry standard things that are, and I
Yeah.
think 70-30 is an industry standard. So I'm saying that this California state teachers, they've moved.
Yeah, right.
That's a big deal. 81-19. I don't know. Maybe. So we'll see what happens. If only somebody in the town council would ask these questions.
Well, of whom?
Well, of the pension commission.
Well, no, that's the last place you'd go because they're going to defend their prior decisions.
Well,
I mean, the only remedy that the town has is to convince somebody to hire an actuary or consultant to actually run the numbers on these model portfolios. Take a look at our cash position, and say, okay, what basket of stocks and bonds would provide us cash that we need during a sustained market downturn, and put the pension fund in the strongest possible position so that taxpayers are not leaving money on the table and paying more taxes than they need to. That's the analysis. It's never been done. It should be done. The dollars are so great, pay $30,000, $40,000, run that analysis. If you make that suggestion, they will be furious with you. So
I didn't say I was making it.
Well, and I wouldn't want you to, because we want you back on the next show
right.
and the show after that.
I think Vinny Testa should make that recommendation. It sounds like a Vinny Testa recommendation.
We beat that up pretty good. I had
Yeah, we
another topic which is a little long. I don't want to squeeze it in. That has to do with the school bus controversy, and we'll bring that up in March.
Okay.
There's a lot to say about that, and we only have about 15 minutes left. So I want to take some easier topics and give our viewers a break. I want to talk a little bit about the ordinance committee. You're working on a couple of things.
Yes.
I love it when I saw massage parlors. You're working on massage parlors, and that piqued my prurient interests. So you want to inspect massage parlors, do you?
Yeah, I do. That's right.
And all the other boys on the town council, they want to go out and tell me what's going on here.
Well, it was there was some reporting in the Record Journal by
Yeah.
Lauren to Chorus, and I guess it was just Lauren. I'm trying to think about the different articles, but there was a massage parlor had been shut down due to basically a labor, kind of a technicality, a labor issue. I think their
Yeah.
workers' comp they couldn't prove they had workers' comp or something, so they got shut down. And I think they're back open again. But the article, there were a couple articles on it, and I think that what it prompted was this sort of, this has been an issue nationwide with human trafficking, and there's a theory, not a theory, but there's people that work in these places who, may be sort of trapped and not literally trapped like they're, prisoners, but basically for all intents and purposes, they're brought in from out of the country. This is what they do. These places almost are more like places of prostitution than actual massage parlors. And then there are also legitimate massage parlors in town that have been there forever. So what I put on the ordinance committee agenda.
They're spas, legitimate.
Yes.
They're spas.
Yeah.
You get your hair done, your nails done, you get a
Well,
massage.
but there's also
just okay.
No, there's a place right next to the fire station.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, well,
But
I
go
know I
ahead.
was, because 15 years ago I had a sports injury.
Yeah.
And I went. I forget the name. They're still open. And then there's another place down by the railroad tracks.
Okay.
So there are places that deal with that are legitimate.
We'll get to the interest
So-
of the town of Wallingford in these conditions.
Yeah.
What's
So,
the
so
interest
the
of the
point.
town?
Well, the point is, I don't know anything about what are the state regulations, what are the local regulations around licensure, inspections. I want to understand from the health department and the police department and the law department. I want to get everyone together and talk about it and say, what are we doing today? What could we do tomorrow? And I don't want to penalize legitimate businesses. So is there a way to do something
That the state isn't already
that
doing.
the state isn't already doing? The answer could be no. The answer could be, we could have a big discussion. I think it's March 3rd is our meeting. We may come out of that discussion with, we're doing all we can do. I don't know what I don't know. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. So that's that item on the agenda.
And the other item on here is to tweak the amount of a purchase, the dollar amount of a purchase that town can make without going out to bid.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Phrase the issue for me, and what are you thinking about?
We want to give the mayor unlimited ability to do whatever he wants.
Okay,
because
and
the
after
mayor's
that,
been-
what
the
do you-
mayor- I'm just kidding. So we're not. This came up with a conversation I had with Chairman Cervoni. So there's been several of us on the council, both sides of the aisle, have expressed some frustration with what we feel are the amount of bid waivers that come through to the council. So one thing Chairman Cervoni said is, why don't we look at the threshold? And I initially said, well, I don't know. I can't even I need two pieces of data to even consider that. Number one, I want to know, I just talked about this in the last segment. What do other towns do? What's industry standard? So that's one. And then number two, I want to know, okay, if we have a number, let's say we double it to 14,000 or 15,000. How many bid waivers would that have knocked out? If it's going to knock out one, then that's not really helping. So what we're going to do is, and Chairman Cervoni's response was, well, let's just see if there's any appetite on the council to even look at it, because you could do a lot of work and get that data, and you might have 5 councilors say, I don't want to touch it.
So let me just rephrase the issue a little bit.
Sure.
Right now, the way the ordinance reads, if the town wants to buy more than $7,500 in goods and services, it has to go out to some sort of competitive bid.
Correct.
And the issue is that too low? I mean,
Correct.
given inflation and the cost of everything, and maybe you should raise that threshold of $7,500 to 10, 12, 15, 25,
Yeah, is it
another
worth
number.
all that work?
Because
Yeah.
it is a pain in the neck to send stuff out to bid.
Yes.
I mean, the purchasing department's involved. The department has to have bid specs,
Right.
Put together. And it is time consuming. And so you put your finger right on it. For example, if you raised it to 20,000, how much time would that save?
Right.
Or should it be to 25,000? And are we really worried about $25,000 purchases?
Exactly.
Is it that serious an issue?
Exactly. So,
So,
that's it. So again,
okay.
that too is a discussion. There's been no action. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
we'll
just
see
gonna
where that
discard
goes.
it. Yep.
Yeah. So we got about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk about the Energy Commission, but I want to work in some vaguely related news articles in case you missed them.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So the New York Times on February 9, the headline, 64.9 degrees, balmy Antarctica. isn't oxymoronic. They recorded it in
I know.
Antarctica.
I read this. I
A
saw this.
temperature of 64.9 degrees. That's a global warming story. That's not an energy commission. But I thought I'd link them for the purpose of this discussion.
So you don't know this. I have
Yeah.
I have one of my weird obsessions.
Okay.
I have weird obsessions. Easter Island is one. Don't ask why. Antarctica is another one. So I have a Google News daily. I get Antarctica stories, and
Yeah.
I did read about that. And I think the other thing was there was some percentage of ice melt that they'd never seen before, and was it 20%, or there was a
Yeah, it's
satellite
huge.
picture.
I don't have that story, but yeah.
I saw that too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So the other story, in case you missed it, is more current
Okay.
from the Hartford Courant. I think this is just a few days ago, but it says energy shift is pushing down prices. Solar, wind power gaining in New England, but carbon fuels still dominate. And it reports on the decreasing cost of energy that we're experiencing here in Wallingford too, because of the impact of renewables, solar and wind and that kind of thing. We talked about that a little bit with Rick Hendershot when he was on the show. That's the segue to the Energy Commission. An Energy Commission was proposed a meeting ago, or a couple meetings ago. It was tabled. It's going to come back. The issue is, should there be a Wallingford Energy Commission? If so, what should be the scope? How should it be staffed? What are they going to do? Can they really accomplish anything? Things have been happening in the background. Can you fill us in?
I can.
Yeah.
After that meeting, when it was tabled, there was some email back and forth with Ben Martin, who was the sort of the leader of the commission, or who came before us and I think spoke pretty eloquently about why they wanted to reform. And basically, Vice Chair Laffin responded to an email, basically suggested to Ben, you should meet with the PUC as a first step. Before you come back to us, meet with the PUC, really get a good sense of what is it you want to do, what are they already doing, make sure you can define your scope distinct from theirs. And Tom, I think, talked to Rick Hendershot, who was, as we know, is the director of the PUC and was on the show a few weeks ago. Had a great time, by the way. So Rick's door is open. He's ready. So I think that meeting, there was some back and forth on scheduling. Gina Morgenstein, who sponsored the agenda item, was supportive of that approach. I think Councilor Joe Marone weighed in that he wanted to be part of that at that meeting as well. So I don't think the meeting has happened yet. I think that's where they're going, is they're going to try to get together. And then I think once that happens, the process of, okay, let's get a chart. I mean, I'm calling it a charter. I don't know if that's the right word, but
A mission statement?
mission statement,
Sure.
a piece of paper, one page that says, this is what we're going to do. And then that comes back to us to approve or not. And then we move on, and then we can appoint, if it passes, we can appoint people. So that's where we are.
Okay, to be continued, what, April, March? What do you think?
I hope it moves quickly. I just think that I would say maybe March. If I had to, well, we have 2 meetings in March. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, we'll keep our powder dry when this comes up. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll take some video clips and we'll
Sure.
comment on what the result
Sure.
was. So we have time for one more short topic, but we're going to have to watch our wordiness. I'm pointing the finger at in view of what's
all right.
happened earlier tonight with my pension. So you, of all people, were on the front page of the Record Journal
Yeah, I
today,
know.
above the fold, because of an email exchange you had with then the town engineer, but now Rob Baltramitis is head of Public Works, and it had to do with a parking lot, or a proposed parking lot in the area of Brothers and the old train station. Can you briefly sort of explain the background of how this all came to light and the significance of it, and just how you read the news reporting here?
Sure. I mean, I emailed Rob just to tell him, I don't care what you hear from Citizen Mike. You put that parking lot in if it's the last thing you do. I don't want to park there. I don't want a fountain. No. I think it was because of the show. I needed to be prepared for this show.
First time.
Right. So I had to email Rob. And I wanted to. I didn't know what the latest was. There was a budget. There was a number in the budget that I thought was, that's the parking lot. And I just wanted to confirm what my understanding was. We bought the property, I think, in October. And so, now we're in the middle of the winter. Yes, a mild winter, but I didn't know, okay, so we come out of the winter, what's going to happen? So that's what prompted my email. And the other aspect is that the Record Journal reporter, Lauren Decoris, has been FOIing all the correspondence. It went through the town clerk. I don't remember why it went through Barbara.
Well, she's the recipient, theoretically.
She is, but sometimes a lot of departments, everyone out there sit down if you're not sitting down. Department heads in Wallingford do have email. You just have to know what the email is. So often I will like Jim Hutt has email, the personnel director. So I'll email directly with Jim Hutt. I don't have to go to Barbara. Maybe I didn't know Rob's email. Maybe that's what it was. So Lauren is FOIing stuff that goes to the town clerk, just as a way to get stories. That's really all it is. She's not looking.
And she found one.
And she found one. So that was the genesis of why I'm in the story, because I was simply asking Rob, hey, what's going on?
And what did he tell you that struck you? And there's something that struck me. And did you get anything other than the pricing?
No, I think what the article accurately says. I think he was very candid, and he replied that this has to go through planning and zoning like anything else, and the planning and zoning requirements could result in limiting some of the spaces if they require, I don't know, landscaping rights.
Yeah. So I read the same thing, but I put a different emphasis on it. Let me tell you what jumped out at me.
Okay.
He wrote, this is a representative of the town of Wallingford writing, what troubles me about the requirement to have a planning and zoning meeting, right? A public hearing in front of, what troubles me, he says, this will require a public meeting, how awful.
Okay.
Before the Planning and Zoning Commission, he said in his email to Chartel, the discussion with commissioners or the public, how awful. The discussion with the public, or with the commissioners or the public, could get into areas of whether or not public parking is needed. He didn't want that public discussion. Town of Wallingford doesn't want that public discussion. That's what's troubling them. It's going to get out on the public, and those pesky members of the public will have their say and weigh in, and it may prejudice what the town wants to do. So the public could get into areas of whether or not public parking is needed, should it be permanent or temporary, and should the town look to sell the land to a developer. He does not want that public discussion. That's what jumped out at me. Your thoughts on my thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't look at it as I think it was more of, look, we bought the property. It's done.
Yeah.
You could get 500 people to come to the microphone at that meeting that will happen. It's not going to change.
What's not going to change?
The property is going to be what it's going to be, right?
Well,
you think that if you
is
get
that
500
right? The mayor has dictated it. It's going to be a parking lot, and that's the end of the
No,
story.
it's not dictated. That's why we bought it, and that's
No. That's why some people voted for it, but not everyone voted
right.
for it.
Okay, well, I
For
can't
that
speak
reason.
To,
For that reason, they're on the record. They said they'll go
Well, they
along
still
with the
voted
vote.
for it.
They said they're going to go along with the vote to make sure we acquire
Right.
it, but they didn't want a parking lot. They wanted to sell
then
it
they
for
shouldn't have voted.
redevelopment.
Then they shouldn't have voted for it.
Well, no, they wanted to acquire it,
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean the mayor dictates the use.
Well, but I guess
Unless he
my point is there
does.
was an open and transparent process.
Sure, and now it's even more open and
Well, no,
transparent.
I'm saying it was purchased to do a parking lot. Whether or not that's why I forgot what was the vote. Was it 9-0?
No,
Was there?
I
no,
think it was. I think it was
it
unanimous.
8-1. I don't.
Well, whatever.
whatever the vote was.
Sure.
It that wasn't done in secret. So I think Rob's point is simply it's happening.
It's a
And
done
now you
deal.
have to sit there and the thing is there won't be 500 people. There'll be like 2 people who come to the mic. Maybe you'll be one of them. Maybe 3. That's what'll really happen. But I don't see this. They're all playing poker together. They're all playing poker.
No, it's more serious than that. It's
Okay.
more serious than that. The town planner says you need a public hearing,
Yeah.
and the town administration is saying, doggone it, the public is going to show up and may interfere with our plans. We don't want
they're
the
not gonna
public
interfere. They're just gonna-
No, that's the whole thing
Well,
is.
no, but I don't think they're going to interfere. They can't interfere. It's already happened.
What troubles me is that this will require a public meeting. The discussion with the commissioners or the public could get into areas of whether or not public parking is needed, should it be permanent, and should the town look to sell land to a developer. I mean, this is not something he's looking forward to. Let's make that the final word.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Do
we've
you
got
want
some
me-
other.
we can't-
I do. You've
Okay.
got a script. I want you to read with great sincerity.
Okay. The views expressed by Citizen Mike do not represent my views. We want to thank Bruce Haig in the booth. I want to thank him especially for being my fact checker on my Celebrities Are Idiots segment. That should be a segment, Celebrities Are Idiots. But next week, it's happened once. It's happening again. Mike Brudzinski is going on vacation, which means the show must go on. So I once again be in the driver's seat. I'll be sitting there, but I'm going to have two people to my right. I'm going to have a co-host.
You could drop the names.
Yeah, let's drop the names. Why not? Lauren Takoris from the Record Journal, who was on the show last year when Ralph was the co-host. She will be my co-host. So we'll and she definitely will be giving us an update on some of the stories that she's been covering.
Who are you going to grill?
We are going to grill a freshman, that's politically incorrect, first year town councilor, Christina Tata, will be on the show next week. Very excited. My friend and fellow councilor, Christina Tata, will be our guest next Wednesday.
So be sure to watch.
Thursday.
Our thanks also to the executive director of WPA, Susan Huizenga. And to wrap things up, so this Citizen Mike show is on at 9 o'clock on Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So as we've said for years, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. It's also on YouTube. I can send you the link if you want. Just let me know you want it. Or go to YouTube, search the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel, find the link, and enjoy. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Chris, we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Hmm.